Hello and welcome to a new type of video for me. I haven't done these in the past, so hopefully you'll see it as something new and different, because hopefully there are things that I do that are the same in all my videos that you still enjoy and understand why I have to do them. But also I hope that when I do a video there's something in there that surprises you or teaches you something. So for this video I wanted to have it where it would be a way for us to get to know a character before, or a figure before we actually get into the figure that we're actually going to be talking about. So right now I'm thinking this is a different way of doing it, and the reason why is because sometimes we get a figure or a character that is so different than the previous incarnations that we might want to do a prequel for the information that's come before the information that or the thoughts that I have for the figure that we're going to be looking at. So I hope you enjoyed this prequel, and the title might be changed in the future, but right now we're going to have a prequel. So we jumped from that comic pack to an actual 25th anniversary comic pack where again they've done the same thing, where they've updated the figures and they've given the paint applications to look very close to what the figure would look like in the comic, and even more so now that they're using 25th anniversary molds. But it's like Destro here, and we will bring this pack closer, but I did want to get for this frame a big picture of the whole comic pack. But with Destro, you'll see that he's in this blue and light blue. I do have Breaker out of the package, but I wasn't able to find his backpack, so please do forgive me for that, but we will get you a shot of that. So I think before we move to that though, I did want to talk about Breaker a little bit more. Some of the things that I thought were interesting, and I'm going to go ahead and put links to this. I'm not sure if it will always be online, so if it ever gets taken down, then that's why the link's not working. But I thought it was interesting that Breaker comes later on in the line with the rapid fire motorcycle, and he's actually in this commercial here with the rapid fire motorcycle. Then the other thing I thought was interesting was, and I've always felt this way when you have a connection to G.I. Joe, we've already talked about in the past about why I connect to Cobra Commander so well. But there's lots of other times that people connect to a figure or really became a fan of G.I. Joe. And I think that's one of the great things about being a collector, or being somebody who actually was a part of the G.I. Joe franchise and doing the voices and stuff, is because you hear a lot of times about the reason why somebody went into the profession that they're in is because of G.I. Joe, because of the favorite character that they had when they were growing up in G.I. Joe. Now, the thing that I think is interesting too is sometimes you connect to it just for the fact that it's somebody who came from the state or even the country that you're from. So one of the things I wanted to share was that it looks like Breaker was originally from Gatlinburg, Tennessee, if I'm saying that right. Now, the other thing I thought was cool, and why I say a country, is because according to what I was able to find, it looks like Breaker was also released in Action Force, and he was from Munich, Germany. So, thought that was interesting. Then another thing I thought was interesting was there's 2 times that he was used in the comic, but maybe we'll get a closer look at the figure before we get into those. But then there's another one that I guess happens in issue number 109 of the Marvel run, and I won't give that away, but this is one time that I'm always like trying not to come off geeky or nerdy or whatever, but my passion for these characters and figures, whether I know them very well, which is one reason why I wanted to do these videos and so glad to be able to do these videos, is because I don't really know these characters as well as I would like to. So hopefully in the future, from thankfully being able to do this, I'll get to know the characters better. But even without knowing the character very well, if you're a Transformer collector, maybe you can relate to it because in the movie, they killed Optimus Prime in the 1980s. When Optimus Prime died in the 1980s movie, there were a lot of kids and maybe even grown-up adults that were fans of it. They were really upset when they killed Optimus Prime. And actually, with the 1987's G.I. Joe movie, that's why Duke goes into a coma, is what we've been told, is because they were worried about killing off another character because of the backlash that they got from killing off Optimus Prime. So that's why Duke just went into a coma. But with issue 109, even though I don't really necessarily remember reading it and maybe never owned it, knowing what happens in the issue is really kind of tough, because it's like, I do understand the people that want G.I. Joe to be real life. I mean, it's a war toy. People don't always survive war, but I don't know, me, it's just so odd to have something that's supposed to be fun and something that's a toy line and a cartoon, and I don't know, death within it is just not something that I want to really think about, you know. G.I. Joe and collecting and all that was a way of getting away from the troubles of the world. So kind of just for that little bit of time, I'm just wanting to escape. I want to be in a fantasy world where, yes, it's war, but that doesn't mean that people have to die. But anyway, enough with that. So we've got Breaker is honored, though, later on in the Devil's Due line, and I'm sorry I don't know what issue or issues, but I think it has to do when they were doing the World War III. And again, I also don't want to give away the storylines and everything of the stuff, so it's kind of good that I don't know the issues and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that they're doing is there's a memorial gem in Wright-Patterson Air Force, I think, or Air Base, sorry, maybe even a military base, but there's a gem there that's been named after Breaker, and it's got his civilian name. Now, the other thing that they do is later on they're having a funeral, I think, or at least they go to a monument, and there's a monument that honors all the G.I. Joes that have died in the past, and then also that end up dying during the Devil's Due World War. So they have it where Snowjob is seen in the back, and we'll get into this more later, but he's seen blowing a bubble. And so that's, you know, if you know about Breaker, or even like me is still just learning about Breaker, you know that that is pretty much a salute to Breaker with Snowjob blowing the bubble. So I thought that was very touching. So I think that's what we have for right now. So let's go ahead and look at a closer look of Breaker and this comic pack, and we'll share a little bit more with you guys. So as I was saying earlier, I'm unfortunately not able to find the backpack. I did look my best for it, but here is the backpack that comes in the package with Breaker, and this cord that's actually sticking straight up right here would go into the backpack. Now, the one thing that is kind of hoping that we get a Breaker maybe better when it's the 40th anniversary of G.I. Joe, or maybe in the 50th if we're all still around, is that we have this Corporal Breaker, but unfortunately he has the infamous Duke arms. Now, if you've never heard me or anyone talk about the infamous Duke arms, what that is that Hasbro says it was a factory mistake, but instead of making where his forearms would twist right up here, they went ahead and they cut right here. Now, for a figure to have articulation is really great, but they were just hoping that without the articulation right there, you wouldn't have it where it looks like he's slit his wrist, basically. And it's just the idea that we want the wrist to move, but if they had just done it underneath the cuff of the shirt, then it would just look like he was twisting his forearm or even the wrist maybe. So unfortunately that's why they're the infamous Duke arms. Now the other thing that's really cool about it though, if you know about Breaker, is that he's got this little like orb of pink stuff right there. Now before we get on to what that pink stuff is, we'll go ahead and show you. So here you can see the mouthpiece that is in front of Breaker. And what's really cool about that is you take that pink orb and then you take it and you put it on the mouthpiece, and we'll show you what that looks like. So I'm hoping that my camera is picking it up for you, but there's a hole that they've drilled out into this bubble right here. Not having a connection with Breaker, I think they achieved what they were trying to achieve rather well. Maybe you have a better connection, or maybe even this was your first figure of G.I. Joe, but me, I don't think I had anything before 1987, and that's why I have such a connection to the 1987 Cobra Commander. But without having a real connection to Breaker, I really think they achieved it. I mean, this is supposed to look like he's blowing a bubble of gum, and that's why in The Devil's Due, where Snowjob is blowing a bubble, that's how we see it as a tribute to Breaker. Now, in the Rise of Cobra movie, they do show Breaker taking some bubble gum, and so that was a wink to those fans that knew about the connection between bubblegum and Breaker. Now, I was trying to figure out why it was. At first, I was thinking, well, is it because he's a communications person and he's just most of the time at a computer screen or some type of communication device, and so he's in his chair and he's blowing bubble. But it actually has some connections to the comic, and I'm not sure exactly what issues, so if anyone knows or wants to leave a comment, or you are a Breaker fan and wants to help fill us in a little bit more on this, it looks like, from what I was able to find, that it was used where they're going through, and I'm not sure that they're going through as a G.I. Joe vehicle, but Breaker and some other characters are going through a parade, and I guess that parade gets attacked by Cobra. Well, the only thing is, since they were going through a civilian parade, they didn't have any live ammunition. So what they do is they use the amplified sound through the speakers of Breaker blowing bubbles to make it sound like that they're firing at Cobra. So that way Cobra assumes that their cannon on their tank is working, and so they give up. Now, another thing that I thought was cool is that, and again, this is all fantasy and stuff, so it's fun to see this, is I guess there's a time where Breaker and a few other characters again are tied up. Well, they're tied up by rope. And so what they do is, I guess Cobra maybe took all their other weapons from them, but they didn't think to take bubblegum from Breaker. So what they do is they take this bubblegum and they put it all over the rope that are keeping their arms, and I'm assuming legs and everything, tied together. And so these rats come along and they start chewing on the bubblegum, which ends up chewing through the rope. So I really thank you guys for giving me a reason to do these videos, because I didn't know that about bubblegum and Breaker. I mean, I did know that there was a connection between the Rise of Cobra bubblegum scene and the original Breaker, but I had no idea that they had done another few ideas in the comic. So again, thank you guys for allowing me to do this. And we were talking about earlier about how there's a commercial where Breaker is on the rapid fire motorcycle, so I would like to show you guys this. Here we have a 2-pack of vehicles. Some may see this as the 25th anniversary, and I myself am one of those people, but technically, most of the time we don't consider this as part of the 25th anniversary line, because it says on the back of the package that this came out in 2008, and unless it has something that actually says 25th anniversary on it, or came out in 2007, is usually not seen as part of the 25th anniversary line, because 2007 was the 25th anniversary of A Real American Hero. Now, it does say that this is a Ram Cycle versus Cobra Flight Pod, but this is a remold of, if I'm not mistaken, of the Ram Cycle, and it is still the rapid fire motorcycle because that's what the Ram as an acronym stands for. Now, in order to get the Flight Pod, I had to get quite a few of these packs, so I have quite a few of the Ram Cycles, and you'll see in any of these videos that this is where I was able to get this many Flight Pods, is out of this 2-pack. So although we have Corporal Breaker here, you will not get the figure that they show on the back of the package. So if you're going by the back of the package, you do not end up with Corporal Breaker with his mouthpiece that holds the bubble gum and then also has his communication device on it. You will actually have to get this comic pack in order to get Breaker and his bubble gum. But I'm really kind of okay with that because I did want as close to Breaker that we could get, and then I also needed my Flight Pods, and I also wanted to get the Ram Cycle, but of course if they had sold the Flight Pod only, I maybe would have just ended up with just the Flight Pod. But if you're a kid or maybe even a collector and you can't have more than one collection thing, then this was a good idea, because this way you get 2 pretty good figures and you get 2 vehicles without having to go out and get the comic pack. But definitely glad to have both of the ones that I was able to pick up.